he just highlighted Avatar, he clicked the drop-down menu, and then he just randomly selected Papyrus, like a thoughtless child just wandering by a garden, just yanking leaves along the way.
Welcome back to Rants and Reviews with Jake. After a very brief hiatus, I am back with my Avatar Fire and Ash review. Avatar Fire and Ash, the third installment in the Avatar universe, was by far the worst one yet, and consistent with the decline in writing with every new installment in the universe. One of the only good things I have to say about the movie is that visually it is stunning in an era of tragically bad CGI. However, that is not a crutch for truly cancerous writing and character work stretched across a plot so contrived and stupid I can't bring myself to believe real human beings wrote, approved, filmed, edited, produced, and chose to release the final result that was a steaming, convoluted pile of feces. And with that, let's get into my review of Avatar Fire and Ash. We're going to begin with the general plot of the movie, going through all of the good and the bad quite outweighing the good, and then at the end I will get into all of the characters, or lack thereof, and how they were developed, and more often than not, how they weren't. Let's get into the plot. The movie begins with a monologue from Loak. It has Loak and Neteyam flying around on their banshees, and Loak is connected to the water spirit tree. Spider and Kiri are flirting on the outside. Kiri can't connect to the tree in case she has a seizure, and Spider is human, so he can't connect to the spirit tree yet. And yes, I do say yet, but we will get to that later in the video. Neytiri sings Neteyam's song beads from the last movie. Loak's monologue continues. He talks about how the fire of hate leaves the ash of grief. And I think they were trying to have a pretty cool moment here where it's like, oh, they said the title of the movie. But usually I've found, in my experience, when movies try to do this, it tends to fall on its face and not really land very well. The only notable exceptions I have off the top of my head are the Lord of the Rings movies, where in The Fellowship, Elrond says, this is the Fellowship of the Ring. In The Two Towers, he says, this is the union of the two towers. And then in Return of the King, they talk about the king returning. It's all not like on the nose, look at the camera, oh, look at the thing we did. It's very... It actually matters, and it makes sense inside of the story they're telling. It's not just like looking at the camera and going, oh, look, we said the title of the movie, you can clap now and go home. Loak then talks more about Jake's way of grieving, which is to say nothing and keep busy. He says the water washes away your sins and cleans you, and then it shows he and Jake searching the rubble of the ship from the way of water, bringing back guns. Then the chief's wife says guns are forbidden, and his wife is still in her mourning period for Neteyam, so Jake should not be working, he should be with her. The chief then says the people need Toruk Makto, and Jake must ride the beast again. Jake says to ride the beast, you have to become the beast, and when you become the beast, more blood is better, and he'll never do that again. I don't understand this. Jake became Toruk Makto in Avatar 1 and had no such consequences or change of character or personality. The only real difficulty was physically mounting Toruk to bond with, which he literally just had to fly above him and land on him. I can see they probably mean that when he becomes Toruk Makto, war follows and war brings blood, but they're planning on going to war regardless, so this feels like a forced conflict to address why he didn't retake the mantle in the last movie, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Then we see Quaritch back on the ship with the general lady from the last movie getting bitched at, and then we also see Parker, the CEO guy from the first movie, who's back for some reason. Why he wasn't in Way of Water, I don't know, and I don't care to find out. I do not care about meta reasons for anything. It's not a good justification for plot holes or dumb things in general. Not that this particular thing actually matters, just in general, meta reasons are not a good excuse for poor things in your movie. Loak then finds Natiri's bow in the wreckage, and Jake says not to let her see it, and Loak buries it. His girlfriend said she could help him fix it, and he says he ruins everything he touches. I don't know why she can't have her old bow back. It's not going to change anything about her character or hurt her in any way at all. It just seems, again, like another forced conflict to further the gap between Jake and Natiri in the first half of the film, so we have a hollow conflict to resolve at the end of Act 2. Then we see Jake making explosive arrows for Natiri since he knows she won't use a gun. She says he should use his bow, and he says a bow is like bringing a knife to a gunfight, but it's actually like bringing a bow to a gunfight. I mean, like, this dialogue is actually abysmal. I don't understand how these characters have less and less chemistry each time they appear on screen. In the first movie, they had a dynamic and a level of chemistry that made sense for their characters and their growing relationship, and all of that is lost in this movie, and they feel almost like strangers who are in an arranged marriage. Jake seems unconvinced that Awa can help them in any way, and instead relies on himself rather than his faith in Awa, which again seems pretty inconsistent with his character in general, and especially where he ended off at the end of the last movie. But again, I'll get more on that later. He says Natiri's faith is all that she has, and it doesn't actually get her anything. I think this is, again, supposed to set up a change in character that happens later in the film across a couple different conversations with Quaritch and Jake, where he tells Quaritch to open his eyes to Awa. But this sentiment from Jake doesn't connect or gradually change throughout. It's just this kind of one conflict here where he's saying, you know, Awa sucks, basically, and then at the end of the movie, and like, I mean, really, like a third of the way through the movie, he kind of is just talking about how great Awa is, but there's no gradual development. It's Awa sucks, and then Awa's great, and there's no inciting event that makes him change his mind, and there's literally just nothing that gives this any more depth than just wanting an additional thing to give Jake and Natiri more conflict. Then we see Loak, Spider, and Payakan swimming together with other sea people teenagers. Payakan is still outcast for fighting back and breaking the whole whale no violence rule, but for some reason they can still just go hang out with him and soak in the other whales. Then Spider almost dies in his sleep because his mask runs out of air. It's very obvious that Natiri hid his mask, but no one says anything to her about it, even though he knows where he left his mask before he went to sleep. And just logically speaking, you know, he should know where his masks are, and he should know his masks run out of air and be far more consistently changing them and have a routine of doing so. I know personally, if I had to swap a mask every few hours to be able to breathe and not die, I'd be pretty locked in on consistently doing so. Then we see a new group of Na'vi, the Wind Traders, arrive on big blimps pulled by the ship from the Phantom Menace. Jake and Natiri tell the kids that they have to send Spider back to the forest camp with Norm and the other jungle people. Their justification is that it is unsafe for him if he can't get his air in time and he could die. This is unbelievably stupid. I don't know why he wouldn't have gone back sooner, and for that matter, why they don't all go back to the jungle. It's their home, and they would be safer with their people on their home ground. It's much easier to defend the jungle in the floating mountains than to defend the ocean and beaches. Alas, they decide to compromise and go with Spider and the air traders to drop him off and then come back to the sea people. The Wind Traders tell Jake that they have to stay neutral, so he and Natiri must fly beside and not ride on the ships. He says they can't have Toruk Makto on their ships as they must stay neutral, but they can fly directly next to them and land on and stay on the ships mere minutes later. So this is literally just a worthless fake almost conflict. And that's something this movie tends to do a lot, is set up something that seems like it's going to be a potential conflict or is a small or large scale conflict, and then literally nothing happens from it because it's not the big action set piece yet, or it's not the specific moment in the script where a character development moment is supposed to happen, because as we all know, character development happens in one scene halfway through the movie or 2/3 through the movie and not gradually over time. Then we see Loak flying around the blimps because that's the only place that he can feel Nateum is flying on his Banshee, and he forgets to wear his comm necklace that they've had throughout all the movies. Then he lands and talks to Jake about wanting to carry a gun and fly with him, but Jake says he's not even responsible enough to keep his comms on him. Again, this is another very forced problem that they made up and started to have in this movie so that it could be a plot point a few minutes from now, as Loak has literally never had this issue before, even when he was even younger and even more immature and inexperienced in the last movie. And after they have him forget his comms once in a few minutes to advance the plot, he will literally never do it again. Quaritch then gets a tip that Jake is flying with the Wind People and tells Lyle, the only other military avatar left after Way of Water, to mount up. So maybe if the Wind People wanted to stay neutral and people not know that they're flying with Turok Makto, instead of having him fly outside their ships next to them where he's extremely visible and recognizable, he maybe could have sat, I don't know, inside their ships where he wasn't extremely visible to any and all onlookers that, frankly, the air traders also should have seen and been prepared for and not been totally caught off guard in just a minute. Spider's mask says its battery is low, but he says he'll take care of it later. This is another literally just stupid scene for no reason at all. I'm the type of guy personally that if I'm playing Call of Duty or a game like that, if I have a single bullet missing from my magazine, I'm hitting a full reload because 30 looks better than 29, and it just irks me for some reason. If it was my life on the line, just put the new mask on. I don't understand what this whole thing is about Spider, like, oh, I don't want to change the mask, I'm doing something, whatever. He's not even doing anything. He's just, like, sitting on the edge. Oh, yeah, sure, he's enjoying a nice view, whatever. But, like, you're in a movie, Spider. You know, if your battery's low, you should probably take care of it immediately. Because, but I guess, you know, Spider read the script, so he's like, oh, shit, guess I can't change my mask. The script needs me not to. Then, absolutely unforeseeably, the Fire Tribe arrives and begins trying to raid the air blimps. Jake and Neytiri take off to try to fight the Fire Tribe, and the Air Tribe defends itself with ballista on the ships. Jake tells Loak to stay on the ship and protect his sisters, and naturally, Loak immediately tells Spider to do it, and then tries to fly off and be a part of the fight. He forgets his comms because, like I said, the script needs that to be something he does now. And then his Banshee almost instantly gets shot down, and he and it land on what is essentially the reins of the airship. He manages to hold on, but his Banshee falls down to its death. In the past, whenever a character has lost their Banshee, it has been a devastating moment as they choose each other, bond whenever they fly, and have a very close relationship, as well as literally being able to feel each other's pain and feelings while bonded. Loak appears to be completely unbothered as his Banshee painfully crashes and then falls to its death, and it never comes up again. Maybe they could have a conversation between Neytiri and Loak about the pain of losing your Banshee, as hers died in Avatar 1, and it was very emotional for her when it did. They could bond over the both physical and emotional pain of having something physically and mentally bonded to you in a very intimate way being brutally murdered. We get none of that. Then Spider and the girls get cornered on the ship. Spider tries to kill one of the fire people with his bow and then gets saved. The fire chief, Varang, commands one of the fire people to kamikaze onto the airship, and he lights himself on fire and crashes next to Jake to try and kill him. Then Varang shoots Neytiri in the shoulder, and they chase each other around for a bit. The ships are beginning to crash to the ground, and Neytiri gets thrown from her Banshee and also crashes down to the forest floor. Kiri, Spider, and Took fly on Kiri's Banshee to go save Loak. Then they get shot down as well and land on the forest floor. They land fairly safely, but Kiri's Banshee dies, and she actually reacts to it dying, although again, this leads to no future compelling conversation about that intimate loss with either Neytiri, Loak, or anyone else that has experienced it, or even someone that hasn't. And just, you know, since her and Spider are growing closer, perhaps she could explain to him, since he wouldn't know as a human how painful that can be. Spider gets another low air alert, and ooh, I just wonder if he's gonna make it. I'm absolutely on the edge of my seat, racked with stress. I just don't know if he's gonna live. The Fire Tribe raiders are seen killing everyone they can find in the wreckage. Varang makes a bond with one of them, dominates them somehow, and then cuts off their braid. I assume this is supposed to be an extremely brutal and painful way to die as an avatar, but they never really go into why she does it or its purpose for the Fire Tribe. Like I said, I assume it's some kind of brutalist ritual to gain strength and power by dominating others, but I refuse to use content outside of the movie to answer this question, so I really do not care. The fire people then see the kids and begin to chase them. As they run away, Loak shoots two of them and Varang cuts the bullets out of them to see what killed them. She finds the bullets and then chases after the kids. The kids escape by floating down a creek. Loak asks Took what Jake always says. She says, "Sullies stick together," the quote-unquote theme of the last film. And he says the other thing, and she says, "Sullies never quit." This is another lazy attempt to have like a tied-in character arc, but it falls flat when they say it again later in the movie. And mentioning something twice in a movie doesn't make a theme or an arc. You literally cannot have an arc with 2 points. The bare mathematical minimum for an arc is 3 points. That's how an arc is made. Along with the fact that Took really isn't a character, but I'll get more into that in the character section of the video. Jake searches the wreckage and no one responds to him on comms when he asks. Neytiri's Banshee then finds her and helps her back into the saddle, further showing just how intimately bonded these riders and Banshees are, making it even more impossible that they would never talk about the dead ones. The kids get out of the creek and decide they have to circle back to the wreckage to get Spider's air. And instead of having Spider hide somewhere, breathe slowly, and basically just meditate to use as little air as possible, or at least having someone carry him so he can control his heart rate and breathe less, they have him run through the jungle exhaustingly. Then Jake finds Spider's mask, and Quaritch and Lyle find him and handcuff him. Jake tells Quaritch that Spider needs them, and he's running out of air. Quaritch immediately agrees to help, and Jake tracks the kids, still handcuffed. Spider begins to pass out, and only now Loak tries to carry him, but Kiri stops him and prays over Spider. Kiri seems almost hypnotized by Awa, I assume, like her powers, whatever. She plugs herself into the ground and feeds Spider a seed. This somehow stabilizes him and he stops convulsing, and then vines grow around him like Grace or Jake in Avatar 1, and she takes Spider's mask off. Kiri starts to have a seizure, and Loak unplugs her from the ground. Kiri cries and apologizes to Spider, who then wakes up and can breathe. He thinks he's dead at first, and then they all get super excited because he can actually breathe their air. Then the fire people find them and take them captive right before Quaritch and Jake find them. Varang asks why Spider can breathe, and Kiri says Awa. Varang says Awa has no dominion here. And then Jake convinces Quaritch to uncuff him and give him a knife so they can fight the fire people and save Spider and the kids. Varang tells Loak to show her how to make thunder, how to use the gun. Jake picks off a couple of the fire tribe on the fringes, and then Quaritch grabs Varang, makes the other fire tribe members drop their weapons. Varang fake cries and then bonds with Quaritch, dominating him, and Lyle gets found by other fire tribe members and run off. Quaritch then breaks free of it, and Varang says that he is very strong, and then she makes him show her how to use the gun. She then tells the fire people to prepare to sacrifice them. The fire people begin doing some ritual stuff. Carrie then bonds with the ground and uses a Plants vs. Zombies pea shooter to kill the fire tribe watching them, and then they escape while the fire tribe are busy beginning the ritual stuff. As for some reason, you only need 2 guards to guard 6 people, at least 2 of which are warriors, and one of which is like a young warrior, and one of which is a young human, so probably not a threat, but at least 2.5 of them are a threat, and you leave 2 guards there to keep them captive. For some reason, Varang somehow knows that it was Kiri and knows that she has some kind of powers somehow. Then Neytiri gets back to the forest village and her mom helps her, and Neytiri says she has to get the kids. Then Jake, Quaritch, and the kids escape, and Jake and Quaritch decide not to fight yet. The kids pass out, and Jake and Quaritch talk about Spider. Jake talks to Quaritch about Pandora and Awa as well. Quaritch doesn't care. Jake talks about Quaritch needing to open his eyes, and it's the most obvious character arc bait I've ever seen, even though it will go absolutely nowhere in this movie. Then they all sleep, and the tribe finds them in the morning, and we're supposed to think it's the fire tribe for a second, but it's just the forest tribe finding them. Spider and Norm nerd out for a minute about Spider being able to breathe, and Quaritch somehow didn't get spotted by any of them and disappeared and goes back to the humans. Parker tells Quaritch and the general lady that they need Spider so they can colonize Pandora. Then Norm and the other scientist guy tell Jake that the mycelium grew in Spider and that's why he can breathe the air. Jake asks about other humans using Spider and asks if the mycelium could be removed. They say it couldn't, as it's now a symbiotic relationship and they're keeping each other alive. Spider is also beginning to grow a ponytail bond thing that all of the avatars have. Kiri talks about having a vision that Awa wouldn't help her save Spider, so she did it herself, and Awa won't talk to her whenever she does plug into the spirit trees. Then she has another seizure, and they finally decide to tell her that she was touched by Awa, and she knows they are hiding something from her, and they tell her she didn't have a dad, that she is a clone of Grace because of the end of Avatar 1 with Grace's body. I don't understand how she didn't already know this or guess something, as there were only so many people who could have been her father, and between all of the forest tribe knowing each other as well as who they mate with, knowing Norm wasn't the father, and the fact that they could simply do biological tests, there's never a reason that Kiri wouldn't have asked the right questions for them to have to tell her the truth far sooner than this. Then she asks the scientists why she can't talk to Awa, and they tell her she has a mental block, and if she tries to connect again, there's a chance she could die. Then Neytiri pulls Jake aside and says they should kill Spider so that the evil humans can't use him. Jake says no, and she submits to him. She says Turek Makto knows best. They try to make this a thing all of a sudden in this movie that she must submit to him, but it wasn't really a thing before, and it only comes up 2 or 3 times and feels out of character for the both of them. It's really just, again, going back to the well of forced character conflict between the two of them, because we can never see them fully happy in a movie, because in the first movie, which was very successful, they argued a lot and they had problems. And then in the second movie, which was sort of kind of successful, they argued and they had problems. And then, so that's just kind of how they are now. It doesn't matter if they develop and solve those problems, they have to have the problems again, because that's what Avatar is. And this is the problem with so much modern writing. One big example outside of Avatar being the Star Wars sequels, where all of the characters from the original trilogy essentially revert to where they were at the start of the original trilogy. In the original trilogy, you see Han Solo develop from a scoundrel who only cares about himself and Chewie to a person who is a leader and a general in the Rebel Alliance who's willing to sacrifice his life to save others. He has an incredible character arc across the 3 films, and then you get to the sequel trilogy and he's essentially reverted to the same self-centered scoundrel that he was at the start of the original trilogy, because modern writers don't have the understanding of what a character is and how character development works, so they simply reverted Han Solo to the quote-unquote Han Solo that the fans liked, even though it didn't make sense for his character. This is kind of the same thing that happens with almost every character in all of these movies. In the first Avatar, Jake and Neytiri mostly had a good relationship, but there were several points throughout where they argued a lot, and Neytiri felt outright betrayed by Jake and was going to let him die. They had a lot of issues like that, and it feels like they're trying to bring back a hollow replica of what was actually decent conflict in the first movie between 2 characters with this garbage in the third film. Then it shows the whale hunters again the good scientist guy from the last movie doesn't want to hunt the whales during the bonding ceremony, and the big bad evil hunter guy that I thought died in the last movie does. This character shouldn't be alive. He got his arm ripped off and fell into the ocean in the middle of a large battle, and no humans went back to the wreckage of the ship, as we saw Jake and Loak looting the ship at the start of this movie. So how could he possibly have survived, swimming probably dozens or hundreds of miles with a freshly ripped off arm to where he could find actual medical help from humans, and somehow also not get found by either some sea creature, land creature, or avatar that would murder him on sight? Anyway, he's got his Winter Soldier arm, and don't you worry, he's exactly the same as the last movie. He's evil to the core, and he really loves hunting whales. Not just for the money, he loves hunting them just to hunt them because he's a big, bad, evil guy. Then the family goes back to the Ocean Tribe for some reason instead of staying in their literal lifelong home, and Payakan stirs trouble with the younger whales. Neytiri has to rehab her arm to be able to use a bow again. With the sea lady helping her, they argue about medicine and Kiri, and they beef a little bit, but it really doesn't matter at all. These characters are flat and they don't matter. The Whale Elder Council that we're seeing for the first time in this movie decides Payakan is to blame because he keeps fighting and keeps influencing younger whales. The council says he must leave the waters and is completely exiled for life, which he already was in the last movie. The whole point of Loak bonding with Payakan being this big bad thing was because Payakan was exiled for breaking the whole no violence rule the whales have. He was already exiled. So when Loak bonded with him and they became spirit brothers, or whatever that stupid crap is with the sea people and the whales, it was a really big deal, and it was a bad thing that he had done that. But they could still hang out for some reason, and the other whales could still hang out for some reason, and Payakan could stay in the area for some reason that they never talk about for some reason. That's something I find myself saying quite a lot in this movie, is something yada 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 happens for some reason. There's really no justifications for a lot of the stupid crap in this movie because it doesn't make sense. It's convoluted garbage.
James Cameron does what James Cameron does because James Cameron is James Cameron.
His name is James Cameron, the brave.
Then Loak tries to speak up to the council, and Jake takes him away before he can say anything stupid and yells at him. He blames Payakan and Loak for Neteyam's death in the last movie, and I have quite a bit to say about this, but I'm going to get to that later. Loak then runs off, and Neytiri says that Jake needs to go after him or he could lose another son. Then she says she would kill Spider for her family, and Jake reminds her that he, Jake, is also a human and she loves him, but she hates Spider because he's a human. She says she hates humans, and he asks if she hates him. She says every mistake the kids make is the human side of them, and then storms off like 10 feet, and then Jake apologizes to her for some reason.
Man, what the fuck is you talking about?
What the fuck was that?
I'm sorry, man. I wasn't thinking about it.
Even though she just insulted who he fundamentally is as a being. Regardless of what happened at the end of Avatar 1, Jake is fundamentally a human being. He now has the capabilities of an avatar. He can bond, he has the body, but mentally, he is still a human being. He still has the experiences, the personality, the ideology, everything. Jake is, at his core, still a human being. It's not what he is, it's who he is. And she despises humans for some reason. Again, there are many bad humans, but not all of them are bad. She can only see them for the, as she says, pink-skinned monsters that they are. This begs the question, no diversity in space, it's just whites up there? Just straight Caucasians on Pandora. That's the story we're rocking with? Because they're just pink skins? Like, that's it? Humanity's, like, pretty diverse, but, you know, the blue people don't like the pink people because they're bad and short, I guess. I don't know. Then Loak almost decides to shoot himself, and then Kiri and his girlfriend find him and hug him, and then they dig up Neytiri's bow. Loak and his girlfriend fix Neytiri's bow, and Kiri teaches Spider how to bond with and ride the little dolphin things that the sea people ride around. Quaritch and Lyle then torch another sea village and don't get any information about Jake, so Quaritch decides to go to the fire tribe. He hikes in by himself and gets spotted and captured by the tribe members and brought to Varang. He brought a backpack full of guns to the tribe as a bribe and promises he can get them more. She asks his name and touches him. He says if she touches him again, he'll kill her. She says he'll kill no one here and touches him again. And he signals Lyle to shoot a guy. You know, we all saw it in the trailer. It's the only semi-cool scene in the movie because it shows that Quaritch actually has a backbone. And then she brings him into her tent to talk. She adds stuff to the fire in her tent and blows some powder into his nose. He starts tripping and she tells the audience her backstory. She says fire is pure. It burnt her forest and her village. It took everything from her, and her people begged Awa for help and got none. So she learned the way of fire. She says, I am the fire, and that Awa is weak. She then interrogates Quaritch and uses her hand tattoo of the eye to make him trip even more. She asks him why he's there. He says he needs her, and she says that she doesn't need him. He says she wants to spread fire and he can be what she's never had, an equal. He can help her conquer everything. And then they both say, I see you, because that's what you say in these movies when things happen, because that's what you say in these movies when things happen. Then he brings her more supplies and flamethrowers, and then they bang. And then we get back to the sea people at the sea tree. The baby whales are coming to find spirit siblings with the young sea people. This kind of already happened in Way of Water. I think they only made the whole festival thing so that the bad guys would have something specific to attack, that the good guys would have to defend in our big CGI fight at the end of the third act. Then we see Neytiri training more to be able to use her bow again. Loak and his girlfriend talk some more. She got a tattoo at the festival, and he refuses to go. She said her whale sister heard Payakan calling for his birth clan, who we were told were all dead in the last movie. Loak gives Neytiri the fixed bow and then says he has to go and leaves. His girlfriend tries to stop him and gets her brothers to help go after him with their whales. The chief says that they can't go after him. They have to stay to protect the calves during the festival. Then we see Loak riding in a storm, reciting the Way of Water speech from the end of the last movie. Then we see Quaritch and Varang raiding villages, dominating people with her braid to interrogate them. And then we see Spider and Kiri have a little banter and then kiss. And frankly, I don't even know what to make of this relationship between the fact that they're sort of kind of adopted sibling-ish type things, and also between Spider's terrible acting and Sigourney Weaver being a 76-year-old woman. The chemistry really just doesn't spark. Spider's actor, I don't even know his name, isn't very good, and Sigourney Weaver is, while a pretty solid actress, 76 years old, so the chemistry is just not there. Then they see fire people, and Spider leads them away from Kiri. Then Quaritch catches him, and Varang bonds with and dominates him. Then they take Spider and send the ships to attack the sea village. Quaritch gives Spider to the humans and goes to the village. He demands that Jake comes out, and Jake sends the kids away. Quaritch burns part of the village, and Jake comes out after the chiefs told him not to, says he's one of the sea people now and they will protect him. Quaritch demands Jake and Neytiri or he will kill everyone. The sea people get ready to fight, and Jake threatens to kill Quaritch and everyone with him, says the human ships won't be able to tell them all apart in a fight and they'll all die. Quaritch makes the deal just for Jake, and Neytiri shoots an arrow between Quaritch's legs, and Quaritch leaves with Jake. He brings Jake to the general lady and the humans with Varang. They take Spider away, and the paparazzi is somehow so insufferable they made it to Pandora, a semi-colonized, practically uninhabitable planet. This brings about another issue I have with the entire premise of these movies. Why go through all of this trouble to colonize a planet you can't even live on? Why not go somewhere with a breathable atmosphere and non-hostile or non-existent life on the planet? Also, why not just send the enormous ships that burn everything to a crisp all around Pandora and eradicate the people so that they can get the materials that they need from the planet? General Lady wants the fire people gone, but Quaritch appeals to the crowd and General Lady lets it slide. Jake is then locked in a cage in public in not a maximum security cell deep in the facility surrounded by guards for some reason. Then we see scientists running tests on Spider. Loak continues searching for Piacon and the other kids continue looking for him. Loak talks about the deep ones being sent to judge you in the deep reaches of the sea that you can apparently get to in a few hours. The deep ones are just little octopus things that try to kill Loak. They kill his mount and take his spear, and he is trapped, and then the young whales and the other kids save him, and he passes out. They wake him up and say Piacon is close, and then we see Parker asking about Spider and how they can use him. Quaritch talks to Spider and tries to give him his dog tags. Spider says his dad is dead. Quaritch thanks Spider for saving him at the end of the last movie and says he's proud. He talks about Spider's mom, says she died in the fight in the first movie, and says he's here for him. And Spider asks Quaritch if he can keep the dog tags, and he does. Then Loak finds Piacon. Piacon apparently found his birth clan and only one survived. It's covered in scars and spears and all the human hunting stuff. It's blinded and angry. Then we see the whale hunters again. They want to hunt at the festival. The good guy scientist doesn't like it. Jake, again, being kept in a public cell by a crowd for no good reason. Quaritch visits him. He is to be killed by firing squad the next day. He talks about Jake's betrayal. Jake says Quaritch is dead and needs to learn to see. Quaritch says he'll see him at 0600 and leaves. Then Neytiri gets the explosive arrows. Spider uses his dog tags to escape. This might be the worst scene in the movie and maybe the worst scene I've ever seen in my entire life. Why would they not have Spider? The only way that they could conceivably be able to breathe the air on Pandora in a maximum security cell surrounded by hundreds of guards. I thought they would catch him, but he seriously escapes this way because the script needed him to.
James Cameron does what James Cameron does because James Cameron is James Cameron.
They maybe could have used the good guy scientist to get him out in a way that made more sense, maybe gathering a couple other guards and scientists that don't like what the humans are doing and breaking Spider out under the guise of running some tests on him. But no, he genuinely just unscrews a couple screws with the dog tags and gets out of the high security facility where the humans are holding the only thing that could possibly allow them to colonize the planet of Pandora.
That is one big pile of shit.
Neytiri finds the fire people and kills a small group of them and takes their IFF tag that allows them into the base. The good guy scientist goes to Jake's cell. Neytiri flies into the city. Quaritch and Varang are asleep together, and Spider also sneaks to Jake's cell. The good guy scientist steals a big forklift thing, and Neytiri blends in as a Fire Tribe member and sneaks into Varang's tent while Quaritch is gone. She threatens to cut Varang's braid, and then Varang gets out immediately. Quaritch comes back, and Neytiri runs away and shoots the explosive arrows at some fuel tanks, causing some massive explosions. Varang and the fire people chase Neytiri around for like 5 seconds and then lose her. The scientist guy uses the forklift thing to crush Jake's cage and get him out. Then he slowly reverses back into the building with Jake underneath to give him cover. The scientist guy goes with Jake and tells him about the hunt tomorrow at the festival. Then a helicopter pins Jake down. Scientist guy essentially disappears because the plot doesn't need him anymore. And then Spider shields Jake. They won't kill Spider because he's too valuable. They run together with Spider blocking the helicopter's shot. Then the general lady gives the order to shoot them both, and Quaritch and Parker both yell no, and then Neytiri takes out the helicopter, getting rid of the brief moment of tension we had in this utterly tensionless movie. And then the three of them fly away and escape easily, just like that.
It was super easy, barely an inconvenience.
The two most important prisoners humans have ever had, one, in their eyes, being essentially just a terrorist, and the other being the one who could be the only potential way for them to colonize the planet, were held so poorly that they were able to escape with dog tags and the help of one singular rider on a banshee. They fly through the night and land in the morning. Jake pulls Neytiri aside and says they can't protect Spider from the humans. They have to kill him so that the humans can't use him, and this is the only way. Jake takes Spider for a walk while Neytiri washes off her disguise. As Jake pulls Spider through the forest, Spider keeps asking what they're doing and starts to feel uneasy, like something bad is about to happen. Then Jake pushes him to the ground and holds him on his knees in front of him. He says, "Forgive me, son, save him, Awa, something about the ancestors." Then Neytiri runs to stop them. The red paint she had washed off looked like blood on her hands, and she doesn't want another son's blood on her hands. This is pretty on-the-nose symbolism, but I actually thought this wasn't too terrible as far as it goes in these movies. Spider tells Jake it's okay and asks if Jake loves him. Jake says, "With all my heart," and goes to kill Spider, but he just can't do it. Neytiri arrives seconds later, says, "I see you," to Spider, and Jake says they won't do it this way, the human way. They'll find another way to be better than the humans. Then we see Jake climbing the floating mountains to the cave of the Red Banshee Toruk. They both knew they were greater together, Jake says, and Jake returns to the sea village as Toruk Makto. The sea people bow. Jake tells them to gather the tribes. Toruk Makto calls them. The day has come. The tribes reunite, just like the first movie. This makes me wonder, why not do this last movie when you were at war? Why leave your people behind and endanger a whole other tribe? He gave up Toruk at the end of Avatar 1 only because he was no longer needed. The war was over. But when the humans came back, Toruk would be needed again. So why not get him back and ride together again? I believe I know the answer, which is also the answer to why these Avatar movies are only good, and I'm being generous saying that, on the surface level. James Cameron must rely on massive world building for the majority of a movie to make anything resembling a coherent plot. That worked decently well in Avatar 1 because the world was completely new to us. He couldn't rely on that as much in Avatar 2, so he wrote his characters doing things that they never would so that he could still lean on that crutch with the sea people. He still, however, had less world to build with than before, less unfamiliar to make known, so the movie's plot suffered. The worst instance of this yet, Fire and Ash, suffers even worse. With little to no world building to do, save the Fire Tribe, which I'll get to in a second, and I suppose the Wind People, if you can even call them characters, he has no new things to present, nothing new to show us, the audience, so the plot gets even worse still, even more contrived and even more convoluted, leaving you asking why to almost every decision these idiotic characters, or husks of, make. The Fire People are a very basic evil tribe who worship fire, death, and suffering. They are never fleshed out further than that, and Varang's backstory and motivation leave a lot to be desired. I'm honestly shocked that James didn't spend the majority of this movie fleshing out the Fire Tribe, who they were, where they lived, the mounts they ride, giving them different mounts instead of the same banshees that we see our main characters riding on, so that he could rely more on world building. But I believe that reason is because Avatar: Way of Water and Fire and Ash were originally supposed to be one movie, so the split into two left him in shambles. Then they talk to the whale elders, say they must go to war, and the elders say no, they won't change their ancient ways, no killing, with respect to Toruk Makto. Then Loak returns with Payakan and the other injured whale. Loak, his girlfriend, and her brothers stand with Payakan and say if they exile Payakan, they must exile them and their whales as well. The elders then allow them to speak. Payakan's clan sister comes forth, scarred, and speaks for the dead, gone forever. The whale way must change, we must fight. The elders agree to fight. They should not. They knew full well what happened to Payakan's clan before, why they all died, and how. They knew about the hunters and what they do, and many of them would have seen it firsthand, as most of the time when they're hunting, they only get 1 or 2 whales. Why would they change now? Because they saw 1 whale with scars from the humans? I don't know. The only real answer I can think of is because the script needed them to, and it would look cool to have even bigger whales attacking the humans this time, instead of just Payakan.
James Cameron does what James Cameron does because James Cameron is James Cameron.
The hunters talk. They say that the whales never stopped growing. That's why some of the elders are so big. Then Quaritch shows up and the general lady says he's grounded and that the CEO guy, Parker, is on probation. Kiri prays with the sea chief lady and she tells Kiri she is chosen. Then Jake and Neytiri give Loak a gun and tell him to stay back and protect the people and his sisters. They go to war. The human ships arrive. The pilot exposits about the strong flux around the water spirit tree. It basically is a big tornado that sucks stuff up into it, but we'll save that set piece for our final CGI battle at the end of the movie. Jake lies in wait, the flyers above in the rocks, and the sea people below in the water under the cliffs. Then the main evil hunter guy notices something with the whales. The big ones aren't there. Then the whales suddenly attack. They begin destroying all the ships, and everyone else attacks with them. Loak and the kids watch the battle from a distance, and they absolutely dominate. Then the fire tribe arrives to turn the tide. Kiri goes to connect to Eywa, and Spider and Loak go with. Took hides. Loak and Payakan go to defend the mother whales. Spider stays with Kiri. Kiri tries to talk to Eywa, but is pushed back. Then she starts to seize, and Spider bonds with the tree to help her. We see Loak's girlfriend's younger brother die, and as you can imagine, someone I refer to as Loak's girlfriend's younger brother dying doesn't really evoke a very large emotional response out of me. Just like my cousin's friend's hamster, I really don't care about its passing, as hurtful as that sounds. Then Took joins Kiri and Spider, stabilizing Kiri, and says Sully's never quit. The one throwaway line we had at the start of the movie to make it look like Took was actually a real character and not just a hostage, which is literally her only purpose as a character, to be taken hostage by an evil character. They could have utilized Took's childhood innocence in a dialogue with any main character to bring about a change of heart in some way, but no, she's just a hostage. Another issue with this moment is that I don't get why Spider and Took can help Kiri fight through to get to Eywa. The intended message likely being something about family and loved ones making her stronger and being what she really needs to use her powers, but they truly just shouldn't be able to get where she is with Eywa. Varang and Neytiri fight some more, and then Kiri, Spider, and Took see the Great Mother Eywa's face. She is just like a giant avatar person. She turns to look at them, and then a missile hits the spirit tree. The chief lady gets shot, and Loak and Payakan get hit by a stun. The fire tribe boxes Jake in and shoot him and Turek down, but don't worry, Turek lives and gets a badass shot where he comes back roaring and on fire in just a minute. Spider saves Took and goes back for Kiri, but one of the air MacGuffin things saves her. Everyone essentially is downed. Neytiri helps the chief lady give birth on the battlefield before he dies, bringing another thing to mind that I forgot to mention. Why would a pregnant woman participate in not 1, but 2 large-scale battles, while not only pregnant, but mere minutes away from birth? You can claim something about honor or something like that, about, she's not going to sit aside and watch her people die while war is going on. And, there's something to said for honor there, but there's no honor in bringing your unborn child into a place where they are most likely going to die. Then Loak finds Jake. Jake has an arrow in his leg, and Loak helps him to shore. Spider finds Kiri, and the chief lady gives birth names the kids something something Priel. Neytiri promises to protect her, and then the chief lady dies. Jake says Loak has proven himself, and he's proud of him. And then an elder whale saves Payakan from some of the hunters. Then Quaritch finds Took and uses her for the only thing she's good for, being taken hostage. The hunters go back out, led by big bad evil hunter guy. Quaritch and Varang find Neytiri and take her and the newborn baby captive.
What did you think about the ride?
Well, it was great.
Why?
Because apparently you're spinning around, and apparently every time you get dizzy,
Yeah?
that's all you do is get dizzy.
Is it fun?
Yeah.
Who would have guessed going into a battle while you're in the middle of contractions wouldn't be a good idea for you or your baby. Then Varang dominates Neytiri, and Quaritch tells Jake on comms to come to him and bring Spider. The hunters herd the whales with the sonic bombs and prepare to kill them. And then squid creatures, the ones from the deep that we saw earlier, come to attack. Kiri sends them to kill all the sky people and controls them with her powers. Then Turret gets up, like I mentioned a minute ago, and all the banshees and other creatures go to kill the sky people as well, compelled by Kiri's Awa powers. Then the hunter guy gets killed for real this time, until they reveal he put his memories into an avatar and comes back in Avatar 4, and the vortex begins sucking up ships. This in particular makes it unbearably obvious how horrible this movie is when it comes to recycling story beats from the last two movies without any of what made them coherent. This one in particular is so abysmal, I need to go back and run through them all. Starting, the family leaves the village to kickstart the first act into something almost interesting. We meet a new tribe, two actually, but they're different from the tribes we know. Loak isn't good enough for Jake and messes up in a fight. The kids are in danger away from the parents. The parents help. They get away. They go to the sea village. They are mad at each other. Quaritch burns villages to find Jake. Spider gets taken. They get Spider back. Jake realizes he needs to be Torque Makto. He assembles the tribe. They get all whales to fight with them. They fight the bad guys and do really well, but then the bad guys seem to have them beat. Then something Awa related happens every movie, and they turn the tide back. Then Jake and Quaritch fight, and Quaritch might be dead, but he isn't. Boom! Avatar! Not all of those elements were present in all three movies, but every single thing I listed was present in at least two, and several of them were present in all three. This is what the kids refer to as creative bankruptcy. You have nothing new to make and nothing new to give, so you reuse the same old crap over and over again without it making sense like it sorta kinda did the first time.
James Cameron does what James Cameron does because James Cameron is James Cameron.
Then Jake and Loak board the main ship. Spider and Kiri go to the ship as well. Jake and Loak find Varang and Quaritch. Loak provides overwatch and Jake leads. Spider talks to Quaritch on comms and says not to kill them. Spider comes out to make a deal, him for them. Quaritch prepares to leave. Then Jake and Loak attack the fire people. Varang catches Neytiri, and then Kiri dominates her and scares her off. Quaritch takes Spider and Jake chases him. The ship begins going up into the vortex, and they crash into the vortex. The ship sucks towards them, and Neytiri and the kids fly off the ship, and Varang flies away. Quaritch and Jake fight on the floating rocks and wreckage in the vortex. Quaritch is about to kill Jake, but Spider gets a crossbow and shoots Quaritch in the arm, so now they're evenly matched. Quaritch with a arrow wound to the arm, and Jake with one in the leg. Jake tells Spider to leave, and Jake and Quaritch fight some more. Spider tries to reload the crossbow so he can help. Then Spider falls. Quaritch catches him, and Jake pulls them both up. Quaritch asks, now what? Jake says, learn to see. You have a choice. Quaritch seems to almost be a character for a moment, and then Neytiri and everyone else arrive, and Quaritch jumps off into the fire-filled vortex, yelling and disappearing. Almost certainly caught by Varang, but it's off screen, so who knows, maybe he's dead. The sun rises. Loak hits his closing monologue. He says, light always returns. Payakan is then accepted by the clan. Spider and Kiri bond with the spirit tree together, and Spider sees the ancestors in the tree vision. It's basically just everyone we know who died. Grace, Neteyam, Neytiri's brother and father. Spider is one with Eywa and one of the people. All the ancestors put their hands on him, and it zooms out, showing the whole world connected. This movie left me absolutely astonished that this heap of storytelling cancer will make well over $1 billion and maybe get 2 more movies. Now that we are done with the abhorrent plot, let's get into the characters, or more accurately, the lack thereof. For the character section, I'm going to begin with the original characters from the first film, then returning characters from either the first or second film. Then I'm going to hit the new characters introduced in this movie. Then lastly, I'm going to hit the characters I forgot about in my first draft because they're just plot devices and I couldn't guess their names if my life depended upon it. Starting with our main character, Jake. Jake begins the movie angry and hard set on fighting the humans by any means necessary, except for becoming Toruk Makto again. He begins still blaming Loak for Neteyam's death, which is inconsistent with the end of the last movie, where Loak essentially saved his life and proved his worth. He also begins thinking they need to essentially get rid of Spider and that Eywa can't help them. They need to rely on themselves instead. By the end of the movie, however, Jake becomes Toruk Makto with little actual reason for a change of perspective and believes Loak has proven himself. This he actually has reason for, as Loak is the reason the whales decided to come to the war. However stupid that decision was, it is an actual reason for Jake to have a good character development moment. He also decides not to kill Spider. You could say that Spider continually protecting his family and being loyal to him would have brought about this change, but Spider has always been this way, so a changed perspective isn't prompted by any specific action from Spider or himself. Jake also flips his stance on Eywa, sort of, before the end of the first act, repeatedly telling Quaritch he must learn to see. It's almost as if they forgot they wrote Jake that way at the start of the film. This is likely due to the fact that Way of Water and Fire and Ash were originally going to be one movie, but was split into 2. I think that is why all the major story beats, action, and character moments are essentially the same in both movies. In Fire and Ash, it feels like most of the characters revert to where they were a third of the way through Way of Water, with no regard for their character development in the latter 2/3 of that movie.
James Cameron does what James Cameron does because James Cameron is James Cameron.
Next up is Neytiri. Neytiri starts the movie in grief, not the resigned acceptance from the end of Way of Water. She resents Jake and despises humans, even Spider, more than ever before. She thinks every bad thing their kids do is their human half, and feels like a different character than she has been in the past. I had this same issue in Way of Water, but it is even worse in this movie. I will say, she does have a decent character moment later, but the perspective she starts at doesn't make sense to begin with. By the end of the movie, she will also have a kinder outlook towards humans, Spider specifically, prompted by their decision not to kill Spider. As she washed the red-painted disguise off in the water while Jake was going to kill Spider, the red paint on her hands made her realize she didn't want the blood of another son on her hands. Neytiri is largely not a character in the second and third movies. Her motivations are inconsistent, and her outlook is out of left field for the character we watched develop and learn to appreciate humans for the good that they can have in the first movie. And last of our original characters, we have Quaritch, begins the movie still looking down on the people of Pandora, Eywa, and their life in general. He still wants to hunt and kill Jake, and he still cares about Spider, but also still wants to hand him over to the humans, who will treat him like a lab rat and just run tests on him and use him as a tool, not as a person. However, he is still a loyal soldier doing his duty. Several times throughout the movie, he and Jake are forced to work together to protect Spider, and even after, they do not fight each other and have several conversations. Jake tries to turn him to Eywa to open his eyes, and Quaritch blows it off, which is inconsistent with his character, but it is very clear the long-term arc they want Quaritch to go on. However, there's absolutely no tension in this arc, as James Cameron already stated even before Fire and Ash released that Quaritch would be the main villain of all 5 movies. This removed literally all possibility that Quaritch will have a significant character change until the 5th and final movie, where he will most likely also die directly after being redeemed. In Fire and Ash, Quaritch doesn't change much at all. Aside from recruiting and joining with the Fire Tribe and getting freaky with Varang, he overall stays exactly the same across the whole movie, other than getting some local tail, which really doesn't have any character implications, which you would assume it would, as that was a big part of the first movie. Next, we have our returning characters that I remembered upon my first draft, starting with Loak. The sheer laziness of character writing in these movies is, I think, most evident in Loak, a character that has a lot of potential to be a very compelling character, but always seems to fall short in the execution, where every problem they have could be solved by having a conversation with his parents that lasted longer than a minute. Hey Loak, why did you bring Payakan here? Because we need the whales to fight, and he is our best chance. Okay, son, that's pretty smart. No harm in trying. They attempt to give Loak a hollow, crappy arc in this movie while already giving him a decent one. They try to start with Loak irresponsibly leaving his comms behind, which he has literally never done before, and end with him earning Jake's respect when they already had this arc in motion in this film and had already done this arc in the last movie. In Way of Water, Loak was a screw-up who didn't follow orders, who Jake brushed off and yelled at, but did respect and admire, as we see when he talked to Neteam. Then, by the end of the movie, he has learned the Way of Water and helps Jake make it out of the ship, only making it because of everything that Loak had learned and Payakan's help, showing Jake that he really had grown and that all of his actions in the movie were justified and led to them surviving. Then, they try to act like that never happened and act like Jake would blame him for Neteam's death. The arc they did fulfill in this movie, again, which never should have happened, we should already be past this. Is Loak going from the forgetful kid who doesn't follow orders to the forgetful kid who doesn't follow orders but proves himself by convincing the whales to fight? Next up, we have Spider, a character who you would think would have pretty complex motivations and character work that you could work with, but pretty much he was loyal to Jake, he is loyal to Jake, and he will continue to be loyal to Jake. He can breathe now, and he has a braid. That's it. Next up, we have Kiri, who's just about as hollow as Spider is. She has powers, she likes Spider, she can't talk to Awa, she has seizures. She uses the power of family and friendship to use her powers and talk to Awa. Next up, we have Took, who is just a hostage. That's it. Seems like a wasted opportunity not to use the only child character in your movie who has a very positive outlook and a very innocent outlook, not to have a conversation with one of your older characters in a very down and negative moment to bring about a change in their perspective and see from the purity of Took's eyes. But again, we never get that. Next up is our new characters section, which consists of just Varang. Varang is evil. Ooh, they could have done something quite compelling with Varang and the Fire People, as they are the only tribe on all of Pandora that we know of who don't worship Awa. They don't. We get a couple lines about their forest burning down, which is a common and necessary part of nature, but nothing more than that. Anyway, she's evil. Ooh, spooky. And lastly is our characters I forgot in my draft because they're just plot devices whose names I couldn't guess if my life depended upon it section. First up is our Good Science Guy. Good Science Guy is a scientist who studies Pandoran sea life and disapproves of the hunting of whales and exists so Jake can escape prison and show that not all humans are bad, which we already know. We already have 2 good science guys. We don't need a third one. Next up is Bad Hunter Guy. Bad Hunter Guy exists so the hunters have a main big bad guy who we root against and get exposition from. He is bad because he hunts whales and he likes it. He also got his arm ripped off in the middle of an ocean battle with no one to help him for dozens or hundreds of miles and survived so he could keep being mean for another movie and die again. This makes it unbearably obvious how horrible this movie is when it comes to recycling story beats from the last 2 movies without any idea of what made them coherent. Next up is Loak's girlfriend. She cares about Loak and helps him do stuff. Next up, we have the Water Chief. He cares about the water people and exposits. Then we have Mrs. Water Chief. She is pregnant, she gives exposition, she gives birth, and she dies. This brings us to the end of my review of Avatar: Fire and Ash. I would not recommend going and seeing the movie, nor would I recommend using an email to get a free trial of Disney Plus once it comes out on that, as it's not wasting a free email to watch the movie for 3 hours and 15 minutes of your precious, precious time. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.